Now, UFOs, unidentified flying objects. Dare I even say the possibility of alien life? It's something that we know very little about, and something that many speculate the government has actively covered up. Well, there's now a new book called UFOs, Generals, Pilots, and Government Officials Go on the Record. It's a series of essays about officially documented and investigated UFO cases that were considered unexplained by government and military investigators. But is the book aiming to make us all believers, or just to change attitudes? Well, joining me from our New York studio is the author, Leslie Kean. She's also the Director of Investigations for the Coalition for the Freedom of Information. Leslie, thanks so much for joining us. I want to ask you first, what are you trying to achieve with this book here?
Well, Alana, thanks for having me on. It's great to be with you. The main thing I'm trying to do is establish credibility for this subject, which is so misunderstood by the general public and by the culture at large. And the point is that I am bringing forward extremely high-level officials from around the world that have documented, as you said earlier, official events, officially documented events, where these physical objects are present. They show up on radar. They leave marks on the ground. There is a physical phenomenon in the sky, and we can't explain it. And as a journalist, I've been looking into this for 10 years. When I first discovered that, and I first discovered that actually high-level officials are the ones that are dealing with this, I thought it was a big story, and I still do. And my book brings forward these people writing, as you said, they're writing about this issue in their own words. So I'm letting people hear directly from them, and that gives it a special power.
But so you are trying to be very careful, right? You're not necessarily saying that a UFO is an alien, or that there is alien life out there, but you're just saying that these are unidentified flying objects. There sometimes have been metal plates flying around in the sky, and nobody's really looked into it or let us know that that's the truth?
Exactly. I mean, none of the people in this book, and again, there are 5 generals, a former U.S. governor, I mean, very high-level people, none of them are claiming that we know that these are alien spaceships. You're absolutely right. It's a very important point that we need to be clear what a UFO is. It stands for unidentified flying object. That was a term coined by the Air Force, actually. We don't know what these objects are. That's the bottom line. Now, a lot of these generals, and again, people who have investigated this for various governments, have proposed that they could be extraterrestrial. And what we're all asking for in this book, that we think it's important enough that the scientists around the world pool their resources and try to find out what they are. I mean, who could not want to know that when there are strange things flying around the sky that behave in ways that we don't have technology for? We can't explain them. If there's even a small chance they could be coming from somewhere else, it seems to me it's worthy of our attention, and we need to find out more about them.
Well, I think the unexplained both, fascinates and scares people. And if there's anybody that would be worried about something that they couldn't necessarily explain, that they know they couldn't defeat, that probably would be the U.S. government and the U.S. military. Why do you think that they like to cover these things up and they like to keep them secret? Because would they be admitting perhaps some of their own weaknesses there?
Yeah, I mean, it's possible, and again, we don't know to what extent things are being kept secret by the government. We don't know to what extent they do know what these things are or don't know what they are. But certainly they must be baffled by them. And, it's understandable to me that a government would not want to, especially the United States government, would not want to step out and say, well, there's strange things flying around our skies. They affect aircraft. They sometimes affect national security. And gosh darn it, we can't tell you what they are, and we have no control over them. I mean, it's just not an announcement that anybody would really want to make. But the interesting thing is that other governments, such as Belgium, France, the UK, have acknowledged the reality of UFOs. They have acknowledged that there are unexplained phenomena in the sky. And nobody's panicked, and it hasn't caused any big disruptions in the society. So it seems that we want the United States government to behave a little more like the rest of the world. And we don't think it's going to be such a big disaster if they were to acknowledge this and try to find out a little more about it.
But the thing about UFOs, or UFO believers, is they kind of have a bad name in America. A lot of people will look at these people like they're conspiracy theorists, they're freaks, why do they believe in this crazy stuff? So how do you change attitudes about that?
It's a really important point. I mean, the whole culture looks at this phenomenon as a joke. And one of the purposes of this book is to try to set the record straight by presenting the actual facts. And, you know, we're hoping that this very official information presented in a very serious but exciting way, but, you know, official stuff, you cannot argue with it. When you have a major general writing an account of a 2-year investigation he made into a series of sightings in his country at the highest levels, presenting all the facts that he knows, you know, it's not something that you can joke about. So we're hoping, and you're right, it's a very hard thing to change, but we're hoping that this book may be the beginning of a shift towards an actual clarity about the subject that we don't have right now.
Now, one of the things that you propose is to create another agency, a government agency that will actually study these things. But, you know, forgive me, again, I'm being cynical, is because attitudes are the way they are, how are you ever going to get a lawmaker to admit that they're going to fund something like that?
Well, I think the only thing we really need, and it's a really good question, Alana, and it's a challenge. I agree with you. I mean, it's a challenge, but the only thing we really need is a very small agency. It doesn't cost a lot of money to just be set up in an office somewhere with a couple of staff people that are prepared to investigate events that take place, and they can interact with other agencies around the world. We have a model already for an agency. In France and in other countries, France, as an example, had a specific government agency within the equivalent of their NASA that has been investigating this phenomenon since the mid-70s, and they've accumulated a lot of incredible and interesting information. So we don't have to, it's not like if they set this agency up, they're just saying, well, there's something here that maybe we should look into a little bit in cooperation with the rest of the world. They're not saying anything else than that, and I don't think that's such a stretch.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm all for it. I think these days you're going to be hard-pressed to convince a politician to spend more money on another agency. But, you know, I hope that this book really does open some people's eyes and at least get the ball rolling, get them talking about it. And John Podesta also wrote a great foreword for this book, and that just came out this week, right, or last week?
Just a few days ago, actually,
Just a few days
on Tuesday.
ago, that's correct. All right, Leslie, well,
Yeah.
thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thanks for having me.